In this particular section of video, we're going to learn about the SMC configuration, what extra features that can be done in this SMC configuration. Some of the list of this feature that we're going to be doing in this video is SMTP, that's a simple mail transfer protocol. Basically, we will integrate a relay server with the SMC console. Secondly, SNMP. SNMP protocol gives us information about the network exporters, uh, things like interface type, their speed, description, etc. Thirdly, we're going to learn about how to view licenses and what is the meaning of each license inside the SMC console, the flow collector, as well as the UDP directors, flow sensors, as well as we can see the rate and the graphs, how many flows are being utilized inside this particular system, Stealthwatch system. Fourthly, we'll learn how to integrate ICE with the Stealthwatch management console. The reason we have an ICE is because it helps in correlating the network data with the user identity. And lastly, we'll also have a look at the feature called Active Directory Lookup. And the Active Directory Lookup gives us more detailed information as obtained from any AAA server, such as ICE. So this Active Directory Lookup give you very detailed information if you need something regarding a specific user. Alright, let's jump on the SMC and let's start from the top, SMTP, and we'll go in the same order as you have seen here. Okay, we are logged into the SMC and this is the first page the moment we log in into. To do any changes to before starting with the SMTP configuration, we need to make sure that we have a proper archive bar set. And to change the archive bar, we have to go to the Java GUI. For that, we'll click on the desktop client. It will download the Java GUI for us. We'll click on save, then run it. So this is a pretty common problem with the application that gets installed, especially for the Mac users. Says that this is expected, saying that for the security preferences, this application is not allowed. So we'll do the necessary changes. We'll let it run. All right, now this Java certificate warning comes up that it doesn't have the certificate is untrusted. Do you still want to continue? Since we are the one who launched this particular Java console, we click on continue. Yes. Now it will be verifying the application that it will try to run, and then this page opens up. This page tells us that are you sure you confirm to run the application. Sometimes while starting the application, it gets stuck into this particular dialog box. It doesn't move to the security warning dialog box. In such scenarios, make sure you have exception list, and in Java exception list inside Mac or Windows users, that's common to both of them. Add this particular exact URL in your exception list. If you add this URL, then this warning page will definitely come up, and then you click on run. This will open up. This will be opening up your Java console for the Stealthwatch management. All right, we have a Java console open. We'll close the extra pages. All right, in the Java console, first thing before the SMTP is we're going to set the archive hours. The archive hours is basically a reset counter. It tells you the exact time at which your index counts should reset. This gives a very human readable format on a certain day how many attacks have occurred. As we notice that in the Stealthwatch domain, we have created something called FE training as a Stealthwatch domain. So we'll set the archive hours for this particular Stealthwatch domain. Select the FE training, go to configurations, and in the configurations, we'll select properties. Expect such kind of delays whenever we are opening the Java console for the first time in any system. This is specific to how your Windows or Mac is able to open the Java. So it says that I have set it to 10 AM IST. It can be any of your time zone you want. It can be any time you want. It's 24-hour format. So I'll call it as 0. That is 12 a.m. IST, midnight of 12. Reset your counters so that every day from the midnight, a new set of users whosoever is accessing this particular system, we have a counters set from that particular midnight hours. We'll click on OK. Now this is how your archive hours being set. Now after the archive hours, we'll move on to the simple mail transfer protocol. Again, this specific configuration is not related to any Stealthwatch domain. This is related to your SMC, the entire system, the Stealthwatch management console, in which Stealthwatch domain exists. Since no matter which domain you're running, your relay server is going to stay the same. So we'll select this SMC. Then we will go into the, of course, SMC configurations, properties. Here we'll look at the SMTP from email address and SMTP relay address. So we'll go with the easier one first. The SMTP relay address is basically the address of the relay server who's gonna relay the mails or mails from the SMC console. So the server that I have with me, the relay server, is 198.18.128.134. Do make sure one note of precaution is whenever we adding any SMC to a relay server, we have to make sure that we allow that particular SMC IP in the relay server. Most of the customers, they do add the relay server IP address here, but they forget to allow the SMC IP address in the relay server itself, which causes a lot of problems. It doesn't allow the mails to be forwarded. So please be sure that you allow that there. Now from email address means that this is the address which will be displayed to the clients who will be receiving the mails. It's user defined. You can put whatever we want. So just for since we're doing a training, so let's name it Stealthwatch @FE training .local. We'll click on OK, and our SMTP server or SMTP configuration is done. Next step is SNMP. SNMP is the one, as we inform, that this information tells us on how to on getting more information about the netflow exporters, the one who is sending the data to the flow collector directly. So again, we'll click on FE training, we'll go to configuration, then we'll go to properties. Here in the properties, it will give us details, what are things that we can change. I'm waiting, or it opened in a different window. Let me bring it here. Okay, so domain, this is the archive I've already set. Click on ASM configuration. Oh, my bad. So it's FE training, configurations, and there must be some exporter. There is an exporter SNMP configuration. Here it is. All right, so it tells us we'll click on add. We want to add a new one, so we'll mention the name as standard. It's just the name. We can mention anything. It's our call. It will be local to the SMC. Which version you want to use? This is clearly what version do you have defined on your exporters. So it can be 2C. Generally it's 2C, that's the most commonly used, but if you have new devices, then it can use 3 as well. So a most common one is 2C. Every 60 minutes. Community string, this basically tells us which string you want to use. The one I've defined in the devices is super secret v2. All right, now we're gonna make this string. All right, this is the community string that we have done. We'll click OK. You can add multiple entries here in SNMP. Hey, I made a little edit changes. Those just a name. Close. All right, I click on edit. Alright, it doesn't allow me to edit because I haven't clicked. Okay, cool. Now, if you notice one small thing regarding these export SNMP configuration, we can add multiple SNMP strings, we can modify the existing SNMP strings, we can do anything. We can in fact make a default one. Generally, what we put as a default one is the string, is the community string that's common to most of your devices. Though in a production scenario, it's very rare that you'll have one string which is being used by all the devices. In such scenarios, we can add multiple strings specific to the device to which that string has. So for example, in our scenario, we're using this default one because this particular super secret community string is used by most of my devices. So click OK. I've selected that as the default. Now, moving on, we'll learn about the licenses as to where are the licenses stored and how do the licenses look like. So the licenses comes under the option of help license management. Here, if you'll see a list of all the licenses that are installed or possibly exist. The most important one is SMC. To get started with, make sure your license of SMC Virtual Edition is installed. This means you have a license installed. In your physical devices, you will have certain grace period where you will have a time of a month where if you don't have the license, you can get it installed, but your functionality will still work. But for virtual appliances, there will not be any grace period. So before even deploying the scenario, you need to make sure that your system has the required license. Second most common license that's needed is ICE. This license tells us that ICE can be integrated. The status is installed. This means ICE can be integrated to a Stealthwatch management console. Third one that's most commonly used is flows per second. Basically, it says that the license that's installed in this flows per second is count of 10. 10 into 1000. This means 10,000 flows per second can exist. It can be handled by this Stealthwatch management console. It's licensed for 10,000 flows per second. If you notice, the same rate is mentioned here. In the flow collection, that is the flow collector can mention 10,000 flows per second. It also tells us that in the last 30 days, when has the system, how many times the system has exceeded this 10,000 flows per second. We have license, not just for the SMC, it also shows a license for the flow collector. Says the flow collector, since it's being managed by the SMC, so we can see its license here. The status is installed here. This means that license exists. Similarly for the flow sensor virtual edition, the license exists here for the installed. Let's look at the UDP director. There is nothing here because UDP director is not managed. The license is not being put through the SMC. It needs to put directly onto the appliance. Hence, the license doesn't exist here. But for the other three, it does. We also have something called flow collection licensing report. In this report, it gives you, right now, since the system is pretty new, the devices are not sending much data to each other. So it's not giving us any graph. But in production or in any scenario where the devices are running and our flow collector, the flow sensor is sharing the information, the net flow information to the SMC, we'll see the graph here. This graph is specifically for the flow collector, not for the flow sensor. If there is any rate to the flow sensor, the graph will not take care of that. It will not count it in calculating how much of the data rate has been there. It just calculates on the basis of collection rate on the flow collector. Alright, so we have learned about SMTP basic configurations, like how do we configure a mail server, how do we make sure we get pull information from the interfaces, how do we look at the licenses. Let's go to the bigger gun on how to integrate ICE with our Stealthwatch management console. Alright, let's move to the web GUI. Alright, so we click on deploy and we click on Cisco ICE configuration to add ICE. Then we click on add new configuration. Here we notice a lot of name, cluster name, certificates, but just above that there's a warning that says that we are missing a SSL certificate that is needed so that Cisco ICE PX Grid can be authenticated by us, as well as Stealthwatch Management Console can authenticate the Cisco ICE PX Grid. The question is, what is the Cisco ICE PX Grid? So Cisco ICE is a AAA server, and the PX Grid is a service that's used by Cisco ICE in order to provide administrative traffic to other devices. These other devices can be your Stealthwatch management console, can be your next generation firewall such as FTD. It can be any device. So in order to add the certificate, we'll click on Upload SSL certificate. This will open the administrative appliance of the web GUI, basically the configuration part of it. Notice the structure is almost the same for all the Stealthwatch appliances here. Alright, we'll go below, scroll it down. In the SSL certificate, this is a certificate that will be used by our client, that is your Stealthwatch management console, to authenticate itself to the ICE server. So we'll attach the certificate. The certificate has the public key, and we also need a private key so that it can encrypt and decrypt the contents of the SSL tunnel. Go ahead and click upload the certificate. It asks, are you sure you want to install the certificate? Yes, we are. We click on OK. It's taking time to load the certificate. Alright, so we see our ICE server certificate example being loaded here. Now we need to add a certificate authority. We have added the client certificate. We also need to add the certificate of the server so that our SMC is able to authenticate the ICE as well, ICE PX Grid. So we go certificate authority certificates. Inside certificate authority certificates, we can add the certificate of the certificate authority. So 2 will always be there by default. These 2 will be there by default with all the Stealthwatch appliances. Make sure you never delete these 2 certificates. In that case, you will lose access to the device, because since you notice that this is running on HTTPS, and these are certificates which are presented by the appliance when we try to log into them. If we delete them, then the appliance will not be able to showcase any certificate to the browser and will stuck there itself. So make sure that these 2 certificates doesn't get deleted. Now we'll choose a certificate of the client, that the server, the CA server. Click on open, and we just write the name. I called it the server. So add the certificate. Yes, I would like to install the certificate, and the certificate is added. Now we'll go back to our ICE configuration. Now, in order to refresh this page, the best way is go to dashboard network security. That's generally the mechanism I always use to refresh any page. Click on deploy, Cisco ICE configuration again, add new configuration. Notice now there's no error warning, no errors, no warning coming now. So cluster name, this cluster name is local to the device itself. It's not being given to the ICE, so we can write anything here. It tells us which certificate it's going to use to authenticate itself to the ICE server. That's the one we're going to use. What is the IP of the ICE? So the IP is, I think it's the correct one. Yep, 198.18. Oh, it's 128.134. The username it needs to use. The username is ICE user. This username, make sure that this particular user has super admin rights in the ICE so that it is able to get the details from the ICE server. Else the integration of ICE with SMC will not work properly. So click on save. Now during this moment, it is trying to connect with the ICE, and when it's connecting with the ICE, it's telling us what is the status. So we'll go again to check. We'll go deploy Cisco ICE configuration. If you notice the status is green, that's connected. It can be yellow, that is it's waiting, or it knows the known error. It can be red, this means the connection completely failed. There's a reset coming in from the ICE. So that's how your ICE gets integrated. The next part is, how do we integrate the Active Directory? That's an Active Directory lookup feature. So the active directory lookup feature is basically uses the information it obtains from the AAA server or an ASA to get the user identity and use this user identity to get more details. An Active Directory cannot replace your ICE configuration or an ASA configuration. It just gives more details on the existing user identity data. That's all. So we go to deploy Active Directory. Then we click on add new configuration. Again, this is completely this is completely or locally to your SMC itself. So you can write anything here. So I can write customer AD instance first instance 01. So the IP of my AD server is 198.18.133.1. Port number. In this particular example, we're going to use pure LDAP, not LDAP over SSL. So the port number will be 389. If you want to use LDAP over SSL, we have to checkbox this item SSL and use the port number 636. Base TN is the base distinguished name. So for example, whatever distinguished name it's mentioned here, landscope local. So it will not, so the Active Directory will only look for the users under this landscope local. It will not go any other place to look at the username. So we'll write a username here. I think the one that's mentioned below is right. So DC dcloud, DC Cisco, DC com. These, if you notice, I have mentioned uppercase, lowercase. So these are case insensitive. It doesn't matter if you go up or if you go lower, it's completely fine. The next option is bind DN, that is bind distinguished name. This distinguished name is used to authenticate the SMC itself to the Active Directory. So we have to give the exact distinguished name here. So CN is equals to, we have SW LDAP, that's the username. Then it's inside the users, just inside dcloud, then inside Cisco, password. I use one common password for everything. So let's see. The moment I click on save, it'll try and interact with the AD. And if there's some error, it tells us that this is an error. Active Directory lookup configuration could not be completed. Something is wrong. Please check whatever it's wrong. So we'll check our configuration once more. Is my IP correct? 198.18.133.1. Yep. Is the username correct? We have SW-LDAP, CN users, dcloud, Cisco com, dcloud Cisco com. Right. Generally I make a typo while typing passwords, so I'll just type it once more. C1 CO12345. Let's see. All right, so now it says your AD connection is established and confirmed. It gives a confirmed status, and an Active Directory lookup can happen now. Now it's being added. So right now what we have learned is, we have learned on how to add the SMTP, how to do the SNMP configuration, what are the licenses that are possible with it, how do we integrate ICE, and how do we integrate the Active Directory and use the Active Directory lookup feature. Thank you. In the next video, we're going to focus about how do we verify the flows inside the SMCs.